I'm Stan Lapidus. I'm founder and chairman of Helicos Biosciences Company. We sequence individual strands of DNA. This is a breakthrough technology, has been a dream of the physics community since about 1959, since Richard Feynman gave a talk, one of his original talks on nanotechnology back then. Earlier this year, we published a paper on single molecule sequencing, and in a sense, I'm quite prepared and delighted to put my personal genome on the line. I joined George Church's Personal Genome Project as soon as he announced it a few years ago. And I joined it not so much because I'm intensely curious about my genome. I'm about 60 years old and with maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of my life left to live, there I hope will be few genomic surprises, at least at this late date. But I think an important aspect of the Personal Genome Project is that one's genome is made public. And that very much interested me. I think that an important part of the public debate in the next years and the next decades will be the question of genomic privacy. And we instinctively think that I have to keep my genome private. It's the most personal thing about me. And I've come to believe that that isn't the case, and wanted to be part of an experiment to see what happens when that isn't the case. That is to say, when one's genome is simply public. I'll tell you what I care about. I think each of us cares about in privacy. I think we care about financial privacy. I think we care about how much money we have, what assets, what liabilities we have, what properties we own. I think are things that we wish to keep private. And you know that to greater and lesser extents, we're able to keep that information private. I think our sexual behavior is something we generally wish, our intimate behavior is something we wish to keep private. Our body evacuations are something we wish to keep private. It's not clear to me that the genome falls anywhere in that category. Just like our photographs are not private and our fingerprints are not private. Now, a difference is that the genome is perhaps predictive in a way that a fingerprint is not, or a photograph is not, and that is true. And that's really what this experiment, the Personal Genome Project, is about from my perspective. What happens when that forward-looking information is known? A question arises about whether I had reservations in joining the Personal Genome Project, and I know that this is something that members of the public and press have asked of my colleagues in the Personal Genome Project. And I must tell you that I did. And I was and I'm somewhat apprehensive about learning about the one big thing that's out there, the so-called ApoE4 polymorphism, which if you are what is called homozygous, in both, that is, both copies of allele have the bad mutation, you are much more likely, in fact, you are assured to have early onset Alzheimer's. Well, I'm 60, so early onset is not going to happen. But still, Alzheimer's is something that each of us faces. I think by the time we're 80 or 85, each of us has a 50% probability of having a dementing process of, whether it's Alzheimer's or other dementing diseases, of being a victim, a patient, a sufferer of that. My mom was, my mother-in-law was. I know through their experiences how grim those diseases are. And perhaps if I learned that I were ApoE4 positive, I would, well, I don't know what I would do differently. The probability is 50% if I don't know, and maybe it's 100% if I do know, and I may not live to be 85 or 80. So in the end, I think when the final opportunity comes to make a decision to know or not to know, I'm likely to roll the dice and say I'd be interested in knowing. George Church will give us one last opportunity to say no. I discussed this with my family, and it was remarkable how little interest they showed in the Personal Genome Project, and they well understand that 50%, my children understand, they're pretty bright kids, 50% of their DNA is mine, but it didn't evoke a lot of conversation. Again, I think the reason is because I'm 60, and that a lot of the risk has been taken off the table. We all know we're going to die. What we don't want to do is die a slow and miserable death, or know that we're going to die young. Well, I'm not going to die young, and the rest is unknown. What do I expect to get out of it? I'm reading here from some questions. an opportunity to participate in what I think is going to be the great public debate on health and privacy in the coming decades. There's a great deal of positive that genomics brings in disease prevention, in disease management, in family planning, but there's also a great deal of bad that can happen from the misuse of genomic information through badly conceived laws and badly conceived social policy. I'd very much like to be part of that discussion and part of that debate, and I think there's no better way to do that than to be part of PGP. Have I learned anything interesting about my genome so far? No, which is good news in a sense, because at my age, the only good things I could learn are bad. The only things I can learn are bad things, and so far I've learned nothing that's really bad.